Claire Denson woke up that Monday morning like any other, never imagining her life would be shattered by a neighbor she trusted. Ethan Walsh, the quiet man next door, hid secrets darker than anyone in Willow Creek could have guessed. Heather Cole, a woman missing 4 years, unknowingly led investigators to a chilling truth buried beneath his shed. Max, the family dog, became an unlikely hero, uncovering the first clue that would ignite a terrifying investigation. And in the end, it was Claire herself who turned the story upside down, leaving a mystery no one could ever forget. Claire Denson was the kind of person everyone in Willow Creek seemed to know. She'd lived in the town her whole life, teaching 3rd grade at the local elementary school and volunteering on weekends at the library. Her life was calm, predictable, and filled with the small routines that made her feel safe. Every morning she watered her garden, waved to her elderly neighbor Mrs. Keller, and drove her blue sedan to school right at 7:30. But on that bright Monday morning in June, the pattern broke. Wednesday didn't arrive for work. Her colleagues were concerned, but not alarmed. By noon, when no one could reach her and she didn't answer calls or messages, the concern turned into panic. Her best friend, Denise, drove to her house on Birch Lane. The front door was slightly open, the screen door swaying gently in the breeze. Inside, everything looked untouched, except for the sense that something wasn't right. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, and a cup sat on the counter, half full and cold. Claire's purse was on the table, her wallet and ID still inside. Her phone lay on the counter, screen cracked, as if it had been dropped suddenly. The police arrived soon after, searching the house top to bottom, but there were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, and no footprints leading away. Neighbors reported nothing unusual that morning. One claimed to have seen Claire standing by her front steps just after sunrise, holding a watering can. Another said they heard a car door close around 8 a.m., but couldn't be sure if it was hers. There were no security cameras on Birch Lane, and none of the nearby houses faced her driveway closely enough to see what happened next. For a woman whose life was defined by order, her sudden disappearance felt impossible. As Dice Passet search teams scoured the nearby woods and riverbanks, flyers with Claire's smiling face were taped to every post, every store window, every mailbox in town. Candlelight vigils were held at the school. Her students left letters on her desk, believing she'd come back soon. But as weeks turned into months, hope began to fade. The town that once felt warm and familiar grew uneasy. People started locking their doors earlier, avoiding night walks, and whispering about what really happened to Claire Denson, a woman who vanished from her own home without a sound. Ethan Walsh had lived next door to Claire for almost 3 years, but few people in Willow Creek knew much about him. He was quiet, polite, and always kept his yard in perfect shape. When the police began knocking on doors to ask questions, Ethan opened as calmly, as though he'd been expecting them. He told them he hadn't seen Claire that morning, only heard the hum of her car engine earlier in the day. His answers were short but steady, and he didn't appear nervous. Still, one of the detectives, Officer Raymond, couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was off. Ethan's backyard stood out from the rest of the neighborhood, clean, orderly, but strangely empty. A few days later, the police noticed something new behind Ethan's property. A small wooden shed, freshly painted and locked with a heavy padlock. When questioned, Ethan said he had built it to store gardening supplies. He even showed them a few pots and bags of soil leaning against the fence. But when an officer asked to see inside, Ethan claimed he had lost the key and promised to open it for them later. The shed smelled faintly of something damp and metallic, but with no legal reason to search it further, they left. Neighbors had always described Ethan as helpful but distant. He fixed fences, carried groceries for the elderly, and never caused trouble. Yet a few people recalled odd moments. The way he sometimes watched children walk by from his porch, or how he avoided community gatherings altogether. A woman who lived down the street remembered hearing hammering late into the night, the week before Claire disappeared. Another neighbor mentioned seeing Ethan's truck leave early one morning, returning with a large roll of tarp in the back. None of it was enough to prove anything, but the image of that locked shed began to haunt the town. As the investigation dragged on, whispers spread like wildfire. Some believed Ethan was harmless, just a loner caught in bad timing. Others thought he knew exactly what had happened to Claire. Children dared each other to sneak into his yard, but none ever did. The yellow police tape around Claire's home faded in the sun, and the silence between her house and Ethan's grew heavier each day. Then one morning, a local dog digging near Ethan's fence uncovered something that changed everything. The first real clue in the mystery of Claire Denson's disappearance. The discovery happened by accident. A golden retriever named Max, belonging to a family down the street, slipped through an open gate and wandered into Ethan Walsh's backyard. When his owners found him, he was covered in dirt and scratching at the ground near the shed. They noticed something buried the tip of a woman's shoe sticking out from the soil. Witinanowar, the quiet street, was swarming with police cars, and the sound of digging filled the air. Residents gathered behind yellow tape, whispering and filming from their porches, unable to believe that something so dark could be hiding in their peaceful neighborhood. When investigators unearthed the shoe, they found it still attached to a foot. The forensics team worked through the night, carefully uncovering what lay beneath. Everyone assumed it was Claire. The size, the color of the shoe, everything matched. The next day, however, the results came back and sent shockwaves through the town. The body was not Claire Denson's. It belonged to another woman, one who had been reported missing nearly 2 years earlier in a town almost 100 miles away. Her name was Heather Cole, and her case had gone cold long ago. The revelation changed everything. The shed, once dismissed as harmless, was now treated as the centerpiece of something much darker. Forensics teams tore it apart, plank by plank, uncovering stains beneath the wood and traces of disturbed soil. A rusted shovel was found behind the fence, its handle cracked but still bearing fresh fingerprints. Inside the shed, there were faint drag marks on the floor and the strong smell of bleach. The evidence suggested that the grave had been dug recently, possibly after Claire vanished. Detectives began to dig deeper into Ethan Walsh's past. He had no family in Willow Creek and no close friends. His employment records were inconsistent, and his previous address led to another small town with its own unsolved disappearance. The pieces began to connect in ways that chilled the investigators. It was no longer a case of one missing woman. It was a chain of tragedies stretching years back. The question haunting everyone now was simple yet terrifying. If Heather Cole was buried under Ethan's shed, where was Claire Denson? And had she discovered something about Ethan before she disappeared? The investigation into Ethan Walsh's life grew deeper with every passing day. Detectives obtained a warrant to search his home, expecting to find clues about Heather Cole and possibly evidence of what happened to Claire. What they uncovered was far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Hidden behind a heating vent in his bedroom wall was a small hard drive wrapped in cloth. When analysts examined it, they found dozens of folders labeled with women's names, each containing photographs, scanned documents, and notes detailing their routines, favorite places, and even the times they were last seen. Many of the women had been reported missing in nearby states, their cases unsolved and long forgotten. Among the folders was one labeled Final Lesson, and inside it were pictures of Claire Denson, smiling at her classroom, walking to her car, and standing in her garden. The files painted a chilling picture. Ethan had been following Claire for months, tracking her every move, saving screenshots of her social media posts, and writing personal notes about her habits. Police realized that Claire's disappearance was no random event. She had been targeted, but the story didn't stop there. Receipts found in a drawer revealed purchases of building materials, tarps, and cleaning supplies. Investigators also found a rental agreement for a storage unit under a fake name. When they opened it, they discovered boxers filled with women's belongings, rings, watches, driver's licenses, and notebooks. Every item seemed to belong to someone who had vanished. Ethan Walsh, the quiet neighbor who everyone thought was harmless, had been living a double life. The evidence suggested he was responsible for multiple disappearances, possibly stretching back more than a decade. News of the discovery spread fast, turning Willow Creek into a media frenzy. Reporters camped outside his property, searching for any sign of new developments. Yet, even with everything they had found, something still didn't make sense. No recent evidence placed Ethan anywhere after the day Claire vanished. The files stopped abruptly, as if someone else had ended them for him. Detectives began to suspect that Claire might have discovered his secret and confronted him. But if that was true, then what happened next? The answers, they believed, were still buried somewhere on that quiet street, waiting to be found. When Ethan Walsh was finally located, it wasn't through a dramatic chase or an eyewitness sighting. His body was discovered buried beneath the floor of the same shed that had hidden his crimes. At first, investigators believed it was another victim, but DNA results confirmed what no one expected. The decomposed remains belonged to Ethan himself. The entire case twisted in an instant. The man they had hunted for weeks was already dead, likely buried before police ever began their search. That meant someone else had known his secret and had gone to great lengths to hide it. Detectives combed through the property once again, retracing every step. In the corner of the shed, behind a loose panel, they found a small envelope sealed and addressed simply to whoever finds this. Inside was a handwritten letter, the paper smudged with dirt and faint fingerprints. The letter began with a familiar name, Claire Denson. She explained that she had discovered Ethan's hidden camera near her kitchen window weeks before her disappearance. Curiosity turned to fear as she traced the wires back to his yard and uncovered evidence of what he had done to other women. She described how she confronted him late one night, demanding answers, and how a violent struggle broke out in the dark. She claimed he fell, struck his head, and died instantly. Panic drove her actions after that. Claire admitted to burying Ethan beneath the shed, using the same soil he had once disturbed for his victims. She cleaned what she could, wrote the letter, and vanished before daylight, taking his car and cash to disappear completely. Her final lines were both confession and warning that evil often hides behind polite smiles, and that she feared no one would believe her truth. The confession left more questions than answers. Why hadn't Claire gone to the police? Where did she go after that night? And how many others might still be missing? Despite nationwide searches, she was never found. No bank records, no sightings, no trace of her under any new name. In the end, the town of Willow Creek was left with a story that defied explanation. A quiet teacher turned avenger, a killer buried by his own victim, and a mystery that blurred the line between justice and survival. To this day, Claire Denson remains both missing and legendary, the woman whose story no movie could ever match.